seen is generally sports, athletics tend to be a very male-dominated world, unfortunately, with most of them. And so, yeah, it's really good to have representatives and have people actually thinking about the female experience in sports, because it can be pretty different. People just don't realize, I don't think, that the experience is so different, and that being called one of the guys isn't necessarily a compliment, you know?
I feel like they believe it's a compliment, but when you really break it down, when they say you're one of the guys, you're cool because you're a guy. You're part of our community because you're a man.
Yeah.
And so stemming off of that, it goes to show that co-ed sports, despite its name being co-ed, is mostly male dominated with the token female. My friend over here is part of, I believe, a soccer league that is co-ed. However, it's mostly male dominated. And so you need at least 2 women on the team to be able to play a game against another team. Not only are you one of the few girls on the field, but she came up to me and she told me that they wouldn't even pass her the ball because she's a girl, right? Because they didn't believe in her skills, they didn't believe in her stamina, because boys are biologically stronger and faster and have more stamina than a girl.
If only biology meant you were a good team player.
That's the reasoning that they put.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a girl doesn't mean that I'm incapable of playing the sport. And so not only is she running back and forth in false hopes that they would eventually pass her the ball, but at the end of the day, they never do. And it's not just one guy, it's everybody on the team.
And also it's like, I mean, I don't know the competition level of her particular league, but especially if it's something casual you're doing for fun, like you just want to be respected and valued as a team player. Like at the very minimum, regardless of actually what competition level it is, that's what you want, right? So even if you do join a team and maybe you're not good, but you want to be fit and you want to have fun and you want to be active and play a game that you love, like you should just be able to have the bare minimum of respect as a teammate and person on the team and just be passed the ball.
Since you mentioned professionalism, let's compare men's basketball to women's basketball. Men's basketball is always the highlight of the season. We always want to watch it. We want to like see which sports are involved and all that, but we don't really care as much as women's basketball. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are people who care about women's basketball, but it's not given the spotlight it deserves. It's not respected as much as men's basketball.
Yeah, and I feel like the conversation about that in particular is all wrong. Like people are constantly comparing the athletes, like, you know, so-and-so could beat so-and-so, like from, you know, the WNBA to the NBA. And I feel like that conversation is wrong. You know, we shouldn't be actually looking at it like that. We should be looking at the women as the professional athletes that they are, and not compare them to the men, but acknowledge the work that they put in and the fact that they're still amazing at their sport. And it's got actually nothing to do with the guys. They're in their own league and they're doing their own thing, and they deserve the recognition for that. And you know, of course there are biological differences to men and women. Like yes, men are generally bigger and therefore stronger, yada yada. Great. That doesn't mean that women aren't good at sports also. It doesn't mean that they also don't deserve the recognition for what they do. So I feel like so often, even when people are trying to kind of defend or speak up for, like, I do see it a lot for, in particular, the WNBA. So I'm just going to use that as an example, but for any kind of women's league, I feel like people, even when they're trying to speak up for it, kind of go about it wrong, because it's not really about, like, it's not versus. It's not a versus thing.
No,
like,
it's really not.
It really actually should be very much a joint thing, like, here are men excelling and here are women excelling, and
you need to recognize.
Well, all of them can do it. Like,
I'm pretty sure most of these women can even dunk on the average person.
Oh my God,
100%. They could totally destroy you, and they could totally destroy you, and you still have the audacity to speak down to them like that.
Yeah, and the way that they do it again is to compare them to the men's, and it's like that's not the point. Like that's not the question. It's, are they a good basketball player? Yes. Okay, let's move. Are they professional? Are they working their ass off?
Yes.
Can I say ass?
Can I say absolutely?
You know,
for yes, you could say ass. And for women in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like often the conversation is so like, it's just skewed. It's not a versus. It's not, and that's not to say that women, you know, athletes are not in the same category as men and can't do as well as men, because there certainly are those who can. It's not to say that. It's just that the conversation I feel is wrong, and it ends up in this competition and this pitting against each other when it actually shouldn't be that at all. It should be just a celebration of everyone who's good at it. It doesn't really matter what they are at all.
I think people do recognize that female athletes are amazing, and female Olympic athletes are exceptional. They're amazing at what they do, and people do recognize that. But if you bring it down to, you know, from professional athlete to I guess person who goes to the gym to the average person, I feel like as a woman who's not an exceptional case among everybody, we kind of internalize this feeling that we're not as great. And so even though we want to say and we want to respect that these women in these sports and in these Olympic levels are great, what about me? Right? What about me as an average woman who goes to the gym? Do I think that I'm as great as them? And that's a lot of internal thoughts that everyone is holding, every view that they have of themselves. Right? Because they think that other people are great, but they don't think that they themselves are great. And so I find that a lot of women have low self-esteem when they go to the gyms. So they're not as confident as they want to be.
For sure. And I think this internalized misogyny is present in women and men. In women, it manifests as, you know, well, I can't really do that as well. Or like for me, it's happened in my martial arts, and I did lion dancing, not line, but lion. And you know, a lot of the guys who do the dancing with me, they are big and strong, and you have like a lion head and they can whip it around and they're so powerful, and I'm tiny. So it's hard. So I've had that for me where I'll be like, well, I can't do it as well. But for that in particular, I, you know, found like my strength, which was kind of being like a little agile, you know, would come up behind you and scratch your back, lion, you know? But in men too, even men who are very aware, very conscious, I feel like, you know, it's a product of kind of like our societal programming, where even people who are very conscious of these things still have these internal, you know, this internal kind of like sexism. Even with guys who are very aware of it, they can come out in other ways that are kind of subtle. Like maybe they wouldn't ever say to a woman, like, you can't do that, you're a woman. I feel like the internal sexism is present in men and women, and sometimes it's, nowadays we're past the point where people are like, no women allowed.
Right.
But it's still kind of,
it's not
insidious.
Explicit.
Like it's there, but it's not as loud necessarily.
And because it's not explicit, unlike in the past, it's harder to call people out on it.
Yeah, totally.
So
it's just like towing the line, like you know something's off, but you're like, was that, or
it kind of brushes off your head.
Something else? Like it's easier to excuse. Like you're not sure, should I or should I not?
It's almost like self-gaslighting.
Yeah, totally.
You know it's happening, but you let it brush over your head because you kind of think to yourself, oh, maybe I'm being overreactive. And that's where the internal misogyny comes in, right? Maybe I'm being too sensitive. You know, those sexist traits of a woman as very emotional, or hysterical, or feeling first before thinking.
The thing I would say is the most important is to remember that power doesn't equal strength, and that strength also doesn't equal physical strength. Like there are many forms of strength, and I would say like finding your own. It's partly about just self-confidence generally, and then it is also intertwined with not feeling intimidated when you're entering a space that is male dominated, which is not easy to do. It's not easy. You can't just like flick a switch and not be kind of intimidated by that.
Finding that mental fortitude, it stems from a lot of training and self-love and self-confidence, and you can't find that on your own. You need to find self-confidence, I guess. Well, on your own, yes, but also with people who support you.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too is being aware of the fact that it exists. I think you have to acknowledge that this kind of prejudice towards women and all these kinds of internal misogyny, like it's a real thing, and it's going to rear its head in ways you might not expect or immediately realize it's happening. So I think going in with awareness that, like, especially if you're going into a really male-dominated sport or space, just going like, honestly, this is probably a thing I'm going to have to deal with.
Right.
How am I going to deal with that? And I know I can deal with it because I know that these things that they think of me are not me, that this is not, this isn't the truth of the situation, but it's going to get thrown at me, so I have to deal with that.
Yeah, and finding that mental strength and emotional strength to be able to deal with that is a very tough thing.
Yes, you need to kind of have the emotional and mental strength going into it, but you also do, like you said, you need that support system. There is only so much of it you can do kind of on your own, because when you feel like you're in this bubble of like, oh man, how can I be the one who's right when everybody else is telling me something different? Is it possible that I can be right compared to all these people?
Isn't that gaslighting then?
Well, that's what I mean. That's why you need sometimes these people outside of the situation to look in and say, no, like
that's
you're
not
good,
what's
that
happening.
you're right here. Like they are treating you like this, or they do have this notion of who you are because you're a woman. So yes, there's a lot you can do on your own, and you can't feel confident in yourself unless you work on that yourself. But you do really need the support system, the people to remind you that this happens, and the other women to say, I've been there, or that's happened to me, or
finding your tribe, finding that community.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Women's Fitness Ambassadors are here for. We are your community to support you through everything that you need help with. So we have the resources, we have the space, and we have the hours. And I think it's up to our students to finally be aware of those things and to take the time to take advantage of them as well. Regardless of what we say now, it's been said in the past, and it's going to be continued. It's going to be continued to be talked about in the future until we finally not get rid of those barriers, but change the perspective.
That's the thing, right?
That finally puts women on equal grounds as everybody else.
And people, again, I think people have a huge misconception of what we are asking for when we say equality. Like people hear that and they get mad and they're like, oh, but
women get too much of this or too much of that, right?
But what we're just saying is it's equality just means we don't want to walk into a space and be worried about working out in it. We don't want to walk onto a team and be the token girl. We just want to be part of the team like everybody else.
Exactly. We just want to be respected. We just want to feel safe.
Oh my God,
comfortable,
yeah, safety. That's another thing I think people don't really realize is when we have these issues, it's also a huge issue of safety, because we don't know what people are going to do when they come up to us, like in a gym or elsewhere. Like I'm sure people have been followed out of gyms, like women. I've been followed out of the subway plenty of times, so like I'm sure it's happening in gyms too. And do you ever want to go back to that space if you're getting followed? Like, no.
Yeah, that's the reason why a lot of women are uncomfortable from going in the first place, it's because of that. And a lot of people will say, oh, you're overreacting, you're kind of, because I've heard of this before, people have said, not to me specifically, but I have heard it with other cases where people say, you're full of yourself if you think that everybody's looking at you, kind of thing. You know, you're kind of, aren't you being a little arrogant to worry about having eyes on you at the gym? And not only in that specific case, but I feel like most women have come across that comment more than once when going to things like the gym, or let's say the dance floor, or even out in the streets. But that in itself is a form of gaslighting. I keep on bringing that up again because it's true, it's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so that is clearly not the case at all. She is feeling uncomfortable, she is unsafe in that space, and you are gonna tell her that she's being arrogant as a result?
Yeah, it's still somehow her fault that she is feeling that way, because she's feeling arrogant and full of herself.
Right, exactly. So that's what I wanted to say. It's somehow you're making it her fault. That that the environment is not comfortable for her.
Yeah.
That's exactly the reason why a lot of women are discouraged from joining these casual sports teams. Because they're being mansplained left and right, and they're being discouraged from participating in the sport or wanting to be involved in the community.
I know for me now, going into anything in the future that's male dominated, that is, you know, that's like a sport that's male dominated, I'm going to be hesitant to bring stuff up. If I have an issue with someone or with how something is being run, I'm going to be like, oh man,
should I or should I not?
do that, or am I just going to be dismissed? Is it just going to be like overlooked? Especially if I think it's an interpersonal issue, because I think there's also this kind of stereotype of women being catty and drama. There's always drama with girls.
They're always seeking trouble in that sense.
As like, no, we just want peace, like anybody else. So I feel like if you enter a male-dominated sport or activity and you have an interpersonal issue with somebody else, it's even harder to get the confidence up to talk about it, because you might just be dismissed because you're worried
about those things.
Or if it's with another woman, and then maybe everybody on the team dismisses it because women are catty and dramatic.
Oh, and they just focus on gossiping with each other.
Yeah, and they're just being dramatic girls. I'm waiting for the day when the rest of like my mostly male softball team sees me and the other women talking and are like, oh man, I wonder what the lineup's gonna be like. Instead of, what are they gossiping about? What are the hens clacking about?
Oh no, the hens!
Yeah, that's the worst. But I can't wait for the day when they're like, oh man, where am I gonna be in the lineup?
Yeah, when
we're all talking because we're in charge. That's what I meant.
Yeah, boss girl energy.
I think unfortunately that these things can't just be changed with one person. Not to say it's not worth speaking up about things, but I think ultimately the people who need to change need to be open to it, and they need to be aware of it. And those things kind of go hand in hand, right? They need to be open to the fact that they might be doing something that is sexist. And they need to kind of like allow themselves to be aware of that without thinking they're like a horrible person or it makes them a horrible person. Because part of it is, you know, how we've all been programmed.
Yeah.
For so long, we've been taught these things that women are property, that they can't do anything. And we're not taught that now, but there's still, like I've said before, these little like nuances, these subtle ways that it's still around. So I think the first thing is people need to be kind of open to that perhaps they are doing something that might be sexist.
Yeah.
And then they need to be also open to changing that and learning how to do it. But I think in a bigger sense, like the change needs to be in a really big way for that to not be an issue later on, which I think it actually is going in the right direction.
Yeah, in 2021, we're changing. We're always breaking barriers. We're always pushing the quota. We're always experimenting and we're more open.
We talk about
all the time
these things way more now, which is huge. Like, you know, I'm actually a mature student, I'm older, and I actually notice with a lot of the people in school now that they're different even from my generation when I was in high school. Like, the people coming out of high school now are way more aware, way more considerate. I think that's amazing, and I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
And I feel like that will help to instigate the changes that need to happen.
When you have a good education system, I think you're culturing you're culturing the next generation to be better.
Totally.
Every time.
Yeah.
And so along with changing,
don't forget to vote.
Don't forget to vote.
But actually vote, because that's a huge way you can make an impact.
Yeah.
But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's totally okay, because voting is very relevant to changing how the system is. Apologizing too, right? Because you're aware of your actions, and if you catch yourself doing that, there's nothing wrong with apologizing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I feel like pride kind of gets in the way of that.
Pride, and I think people also, kind of like what I said before, people have this idea that if you admit to doing something that's sexist, that you're a bad person, but you have to be able to acknowledge. And for me, it's something I think about as a white person. Like, there are things that you have internalized you don't even know. And it's because of things you've been told your whole life by other people and people, older generations or whatever, or the media. And so if you admit to like having made a mistake like that, it's not the end of the world. And the fact that you're admitting it, apologizing, wanting to change, things will get better from that, right? So it's not as though like, oh, if you mess up, that's it. There's no way back. You're done. You're out. If like I said, if you're open, you're willing, you're aware, so much can come from that.
That's the biggest barrier to apologizing. It's cancel culture. People are afraid of being labeled as the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because they admit to their mistakes, now all of a sudden you're playing out your cards on the table. You're showing to everybody that you've made this mistake, that mistake, this mistake, and that mistake.
Yeah.
And you're apologizing for it. And it's not the apology that they feel bad about, it's exposing their mistakes to everybody present.
Yeah.
And so, but I feel like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, my hope is, and I feel, at least in my world and the people I associate with, that the instances of cancel culture that are really dramatic and that are examples of like overdoing it I'm hoping the minority. Like I at least know in the people I associate with where, if a mistake like that was acknowledged and moved forward from and apologized for, like in terms of a sexist comment or something, like that's not a scenario where and me personally, where I would be like, well, never mind. So I'm really hoping that those instances of cancel culture where it's we're all kind of like, do we need to cancel them for that though? Like, some of it very justified.
Yes.
Obviously, though, there are some instances where you're like, and I'm hoping that those are like the squeaky wheel that's just really loud. What is the phrase where it's like the loudest thing? It's just very loud, but it's not like representative. That's my hope. I feel like it's one of those things where we make so much progress, and then that progress kind of like goes back a bit, and you're like, whoa, and we just have to adjust.
Yeah.
We gotta find the sweet spot with that stuff, and I don't know. I think it might discourage people though from admitting to that kind of stuff, which I understand, but
cancel culture is a bit scary too. I feel like people go over, like you said, people kind of go overboard with cancel culture.
Yeah.
That's why people are also afraid to apologize.
Yeah. But it's hard. Like that's why I say, like, I hope it is just like a loud minority of cancelers who are doing that, where the rest of us, you know, have enough reason to understand that people are dynamic and flawed and require, you know, forgiveness more often than not. So hopefully.
Yeah, I feel like when you're more open with yourself, you're more open to discussion, and therefore that makes you, I believe, more understanding of the things around you, because you're aware that you made a mistake and you're willing to talk about it, right? So that opens the ground for discussion and a change in perspective. So you're willing to change your views on things, and for the better, hopefully. On top of perspective change and apologizing and taking accountability for yourself, I feel like women can also be empowered in those situations. So empowerment goes a long way. So we talked a lot about community and finding support with each other. And so confident woman is an empowered woman, is therefore a woman who is able to walk into these spaces with, I guess, lesser fear than somebody who is automatically scared to go to the gym. And so I think that programs like self-defense, dance, fitness in general, can definitely help with a person's self-love and self-esteem. And so that in turn makes them feel more confident to enter spaces that would otherwise completely scare them and completely deter them from working out and trying to be the best that they can be in, like, fitness-wise.
Yeah, and having this community with like the women's fitness ambassadors and just getting more and more women involved to share the experience. I feel like even if you're entering a space that's still male dominated, if you know you have that support system, you have that community behind you, if you enter that space, you know that you might get some of those issues coming up, but you also know that you have a huge support system,
right,
and that you have many women who've been through a similar thing, and that, you know, you may find a solution, but that you may also have to, you know, depending on the situation, remove yourself from it.
Exactly.
And also I think it's important that removing yourself from a situation is not defeat, necessarily. In some cases, because in my situation, I didn't want to necessarily leave my team, and I thought about that. I was like, oh, am I just like giving up? Should I be fighting harder to show that? But that's why I say, like, not all situations can be solved just by one person speaking up. I think a lot of the time, a lot of this really internal stuff, people need kind of a bigger event to happen to them to make them want to change their mind about women, or, you know, whatever the issue is. So it's important that you don't think about it as defeat if you do decide to remove yourself from a situation like that, because you can only fight so much. You have to look out for yourself and your health and your well-being, and sometimes that means exiting, and that's okay. And, you know, you're not a failure to all women if you don't like fight till the bitter end and end up like really hurting yourself in doing so.
Exactly. An empowered woman is not exactly someone who continuously pushes forward in adversity. I mean, there are cases where pushing forward in the face of adversity is amazing and is like respectable, but pulling back is also an empowered woman too. And I totally understand that, because how much of yourself are you willing to lose in the process of pushing forward? So you're losing your identity, you're forgetting who you are, and you're crushing your self-esteem by staying in a place that's constantly stretching you thin, molding you to be lesser of a person than you are. So finding a better community, I think, is the best way to love yourself, essentially.
Totally. And the thing is, those communities will only grow because there are so many of us who feel this way. So like, we're, you know, it's just gonna get bigger and bigger. And, you know, on that note of an empowered woman, like, I think an empowered woman is a woman who acknowledges that it's okay to take care of yourself. A woman who says, like, I'm worth it. Sorry to say that, but honestly, it's the truth though. It's an empowered woman because society tells us you're not worth it. You're not worth standing up for yourself. You're not worth exiting a situation you don't like. You're not worth it. So everybody's telling us that. So an empowered woman says, I am, and whatever that means for her, whether it means continuing through a situation or exiting it. An empowered woman takes care of herself.